There's another clue here that tells us about this. It's going to be the next slide. East of the Garden of Eden were placed cherubim, a flaming sword that turned every which way to keep the way of the tree of life. Now, it doesn't say to keep you out. It just says to keep the way. When you translate it, in Hebrew down below that. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden numerous, tall, flaming, glittering desolations to protect the way to the tree of life. From the verbs charob, lahat, and mithpikat. You see the definitions there. And this, underneath that arrow, is where the Garden of Eden is, in the middle of, let's say, 25 volcanoes. That's why I thought, whoops, wrong address. Over here where it says Havilah, that is Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,000 feet tall, and on the sides of it, 2 smaller volcanoes, and then all those little yellow pins are volcanoes around there. Now, in Ezekiel, the Lord talks to, Ezekiel writes it down for the Lord. The Lord talks to the devil, to Satan. He says, "You were the anointed cherub that covered, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." Believe me, it's warm there. You can get around in the area. It's not that bad. But these are volcanoes, and one of them in particular has been active probably since the time the garden was active. It's the only kind of volcano like this in the world today. It's called a natron volcano. And its magma comes out at about 500 or 600 degrees Fahrenheit, half the temperature of all the normal volcanoes. And it's a carbonite. It makes fizzy water as well as fine glass bubbles that blow up and then break from their own weight. In fact, you can camp up on top of this particular volcano at the edge, touches the edge of the Garden of Eden. And it's called by the locals the Mountain of God. And the locals are the Maasai. They moved in there from Kenya. They were forced out by the British, and they became the shepherds of the area, joining with some of the local people in Arusha around the area of the garden. So it's hot stones. Eden is where Satan walked, and he walked upon the holy mountain of God. The mountain of God, the locals call it the mountain of God. Did he get up on the top? We can do it today and camp there and watch the magma flow up right on top of the volcano. So did he do it? Well, maybe he did. Well, yeah, I see that. Okay. All right, we're going to skip that. Okay, now this is a Garden of Eden. It's called Ngoro. The crater in the center there, where the little blue lake is in the middle of the only intact, collapsed volcano. It was as tall as Kilimanjaro. It was 19,000 feet tall. It collapsed a long time ago, before God made the Garden of Eden. And the walls are all still intact. The water for this came from the upper right, where you see that top right arrow going to where it says spring. Look at the grooves in the topography. It grooved down. Some of the water went down into Eden to water it there. Some of the water went to the east of, to the upper right-hand corner, and that formed the headwaters of 3 of the rivers. And the Pishon was formed under Impekai. Here you see that on the right. Underneath that, you'll see the ridges forming down there, and it went out to form Havilah. The water that came out of that spring was a huge amount of water. The Missouri and Mississippi River system puts out 5 million gallons a second, right? The Missouri-Mississippi River system starts out in a little place in the mountains up near Yellowstone Park, and it's got 3,000 gallons a second to come out of that. And by the time it flows through the erosion path and gets the water from the catchment area, it's now 5 million gallons a second. The Amazon starts with a trickle from a little ice flow in Peru up on the top of a mountain and catches water going along the path and becomes, I forget, something like 8 million gallons per second water flow out. So even if there was only a little water coming out of the spring, it would have been able to feed a lot of rivers. But there was more than a little. It's there today. You can see it. It's like, it would be like a geyser in Yellowstone Park, except it's big. You're talking about 20-acre hole. And the water came, the verb it used says the water came up out of Eden to water. Yes, I see that. What are we doing here? I'm over time. Okay. And it flowed up like this, like tree limbs, and flowed down onto the ground. Okay, this is a satellite photo from Satellite Imaging Corporation of the garden part of this. That's a salt, kind of like a saltwater pond there nowadays. And where it says Lake Magadi, there's little spots of green you can see, and that's one of the forests there, and that's the Levi forest. And up here where you see the Layani River, it comes down from one of those volcanoes that we saw on the top part of Eden. And the Mungi River, on the right, comes from the stream, the spring, that came down to feed all the major rivers plus the Garden of Eden. And there's a little forest under there in that green area. There are a number of water holes there that the rhinoceros use, and the rhinos, and well, even the elephants. There are 25,000 large mammals living there today. The Maasai are allowed to come in and up over the side with their cattle to graze them during the day, but they have to go home at night. No one else is allowed to go and settle there. Around the rim, because this is such a beautiful place, hotels have built accommodation that you can go to today. Kings and queens have gone there. The vice president of China went there last month. And what are they going to? Well, this is this nice, beautiful place, and it's a conservation area. Let's save the animals there. You bet. Let's save them all. You saw the birds, the zebras, the lions. That area needs to be protected. And we need to, appreciate what we've got there. They call it, well, this could be the last Eden of Africa, they say, so come visit now. Pay us your bucks and come see it now. Well, it's not the last Eden. It is the Eden. It's not the eighth wonder of the world. It is the wonder of the world. And you can go there. You can stay in a hotel. You can get in a Jeep, take a safari down inside the thing, and walk on the dirt that Adam walked on. Pick up the dirt and carry part of Adam's molecules with you. It's an amazing place. And here you can see another satellite photo of the erosions. Some figures on the water flows. I've already told you that. If you look in the upper left-hand corner there where it says water, where the E and the R are on a little blue arrow, that's showing you the 20-acre emission point for the spring that comes up rather fast. I calculated it could have been somewhere around 4 or 5 million gallons per second out of that spot. And by the time it went down over the Great East African Rift, it would have been gazillions. I don't know, but it chewed holes in the crust of the earth. It was big. And as I say, I'm going to make available a CD-ROM that has the plugins you can put into Google Earth, get high-resolution photos. I would have done it here for you now, except legally I couldn't. And you'll be able to fly over these areas down the riverbeds and into the Eden and zoom around it and use your mouse and control it and go down inside and look. And if you use Google Earth, they let people that have been there post pictures inside the Garden of Eden. And you'll see these little boxes. You can click on them and see views of what they see, what they have seen in the Garden of Eden. The land of Eden is the blue. The Garden of Eden is that little yellow, and the Eden complex, and that little green circle is the crater. The whole complex is 136 square miles. The little green circle is 102.1 square miles approximately. The land of Eden itself is, as you see, 330,000 square miles. And to the archaeologists, strangely enough, there's Omo Valley, where they found the oldest bones of known humans. And they say they're millions of years old, but they found them here in the Omo Valley at the edge of Eden. And at the old Duvai Gorge, the Leakeys found that skeleton of another old, antique human being. I forget which one of the series they put him at. But the point is, they have put the beginning of man right here. Right here. And the people that live there tell you, well, yeah, this is the mountain of God. This is where God made it. In fact, the Maasai legends say, after God made man, he went up into the sky and didn't see him again. And there are two mountains of God. People say that the Mount Sinai, where Moses talked to him, they thought that was it. They thought the Temple Mount would have been the mountain of God. That's why they were all looking over in Iraq, Iran, and Israel for the Garden of Eden. Until I found the Garden of Eden, I didn't even know there was a place called the Mountain of God by the locals. And that's it. That's the holy mountain of God. That's where Satan did his deed. That's why in Ezekiel, he said, look, you've walked in the hot stones. You've walked up on the top of the mountain of God, You've been here. There are over, you can see there's over 500 species of birds. I'll tell you, those flamingos, I had to laugh. I thought anybody that's 40 years old is going to appreciate this. The number of pink flamingos that'll be on your front porch there. Let's see. Okay. Now, let's move on. We're running out of time. You heard the story about Adam and Eve, and they took fig leaves to weave their clothes because they were embarrassed once they ate of the tree of knowledge. In this crater, among the other trees, is Aiden's quinine fig tree, which is a leathery leaf, and you sew those together to make a waistcoat or, to cover yourself from nakedness. So they have that there. It's called the Ravolfia cafra plant, and it's the fig tree, fig leaf. Biologists are saying that the mitochondrial Eve came from Tanzania, right there in the Omo Valley. And that's how they traced the genetic patterns of man from Tanzania all the way around the planet here. Without putting the continents back together, they traced it by testing DNA. And you can see that even they agree this was where Eden was and is today. Okay, the movie Out of Africa was shot there. Hatari was shot there, which I don't recommend. It was a stupid movie. But Out of Africa was beautiful. Robert Redford and Meryl Streep had a picnic there on the side of the crater. And it wasn't called Garden of Eden, but it was just where they were having a picnic. And it showed you some of the beautiful scenes. In fact, we were able to, just before we came up yesterday, to get a box of DVDs from a tourist agent filmed inside the Ngaro crater. And it's called Ngaro and skip my mind. It's where all the animals are there anyway in a reserve. You'd know it. Anyway, it's something and Ngaro, and you can get that video online or at Amazon, or you can get it from us here. We have 30 or 40 of them, something like that. That's all they let me have. But it's a sales pitch to tell you to go to this place. And in there, I think it's in the first 5 minutes, he says, and it's almost like the Eden of Africa. And I'm thinking, duh. Anyway, it's really good. Okay, and you can see all the presidents that have visited there. And the old Duvai Gorge, which there's that museum where I showed you where the Leakeys were, is known as the cradle of mankind in archaeological circles, and that's, of course, why. Okay. And this is a review of what you've seen. I guess now that we're off the video, have you got any questions? Yes, sir.
Why did you have a picture of the Missouri River up there?
Well, I to explain more about that. I did mention that the Missouri River fed into the Mississippi and that it started at Yellowstone. And I did a little bit earlier in the thing that I should have. And I was just going to show you the details of it. I can run it back if you want. Do you want to?
I'm from Missouri, so I'm not going to.
All right. Well, it all starts at Browers Spring. You can look it up. Browers Spring. Yeah, just to the southwest corner of Yellowstone. It's called Browers Spring. And sometimes in the year it's 15,000 gallons a second, sometimes 3,000. By the time it flows and collects in the Missouri and feeds into the Mississippi and exits into the Gulf, it is 5 million gallons a second. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have an idea what you think happened with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life?
What happened to the tree of knowledge and the tree of life? I have wondered that. When I was looking at the genetic mitochondrial Eve distribution, I saw it looked like a tree of life spread. I wondered if it weren't a play on that. I don't know. The tree of life where it spread out. But, it could be an actual tree that gives you everlasting life. I doubt that we'll find it there. It would have been taken away if it was functional like that, I'm sure. There are some plants in there, according to the local legends, that will heal your body to the point that you live a long time. But what, I don't know. The Maasai people are, very poor, and Tanzanians all through there, they're very poor. I mean, extremely poor. And I do encourage support of the Ngoro Conservation Area, which comes out of UNESCO. But still, we need to preserve that. It is a world treasure. It's not Islamic, Christian, or Jewish. It is a world treasure. We all come from the same place. And whether it's got the tree of life, the tree of knowledge there, doesn't matter to me. I just love to go there myself. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, now this information is out there, is there any fear or concern about this area now turning into the next Cancun?
No, that's a good question. Is it going to be the next Cancun now that this information is out there? The rich and famous have wandered over there, kings and queens, as I say. Prince Charles and his boys went there, and it was the place to go if you were with the rich and famous. But the problem is the Islamic terrorists are all around there in the Sudan, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, and it is going to be a risk for you to go there. I'm telling you that now. I got to be fair about it. It is a risk to your safety to be kidnapped as a white American, European type going over into Africa in that area. Now, I would hope that they could guarantee it, but even the government of Tanzania is not sure it's staying in business with the terrorists. So, yeah, being another Cancun, don't think. Well, mind you, one of the lodges that's been there the longest, you can see this all on the internet. Again, I wanted to show you all the pictures of places, but copyright. I called the owners of these lodges. No, it's copyright. Okay, fine. Go on the internet, look up Ngoro lodges, or safaris, and see where you can go. And this one particular place, I said, Holly, come look at this. Boy, are they proud. $1,000 a night per person to stay in this lodge, and it's not the Hilton either, but they had a bathtub. That's good. A toilet, indoor toilet. But there are others. If you like camping, they take safaris out in tents, and you can do that for $150 a day. But it's commercial, and in fact, some of the Maasai have now realized that Europeans coming in there will buy trinkets, and so sadly, you come into the Maasai village and they put on a show for you and do the in-place dancing up and down where they jump up and down, and sell you trinkets they've made. And okay, that's all right. But I don't like to exploit people like that. And but you can see how they say, well, look, wealth comes from these people to come see our dirt here. That's great. Let's sell stuff. I would hope that somehow or another we could help them. I'd rather spend money there than on a lot of things our government throws it away on, and the world for that matter. It's not just America. The world should foot the bill for this. It is our place. It's our homestead. Yes, sir.
Just one quick question about the time frame. I wasn't quite certain what you said in front of when Adam and God didn't actually exist. Was that 6,000 years?
It was back then, very early in the piece, 6,000 years ago. And if you read the Bible, you'll see that they didn't have children in the garden. They were old enough to have sex and to be aware of their parts. But then God took them out of Eden over into Ethiopia probably, or Kenya. And there's where they had Cain and Abel and their other descendants outside the garden. They never procreated inside the garden because they sinned. 6,000 years. Yeah, I was just kind of adding to that, just ad lib.
Where is the garden in relation to the equator, and what is the kind of climate that they have there now? Is it real hot? Is it real wet?
During the wet season, it is very wet and muddy. During the dry season, very dry, sandy, dusty. But they do say the best time is sometime in the wet for the vegetation, the beauty of it. The equator, I'm just trying to think on that. Equator would run through where? North Africa? Egypt? Does the equator run through? Yeah. So it would be slightly south of the equator, but not far. It would be warm, hot, and a lot of flies. The livestock around there that they raise, you get cattle flies, and so you'll be doing the Australian wave like this a lot if you go. I just wish we could organize a bunch of people to go over so they wouldn't dare kidnap any of us. We could go in there and walk the valley and take the photos and kick the tires and light the fires. Yes, ma'am.
After the flood, it just destroyed everything. And I understand where the river, where the proof that the rivers ran to there.
Right.
But you said the locals had stories.
Well,
Do you think they were just drawn there for some reason?
possibly, but understand that after the flood, Noah designated the 3 areas for his sons, to occupy. Well, Ham took Africa. Shem came around the backside into Madagascar, India, that way. And they had descendants. And they told their descendants, here's the story over there across, well, now there's a big sea there, but they used to be joined to us. The Aborigines in Australia told us, we originated in Africa, but we walked across, in underground or whatever.
So they were able to recognize some of the terrain after the water was...
Well, they knew where the Kilimanjaro and where the volcano fields were. And they could find the riverbeds for sure up in that area. But the locals just knew that it was, that's the mountain of God. And the mountain of God was next to the place where we were created. So, it was because of the migrations of people who knew where it was. And after the flood settled, of course, you'd know that was the land. I mean, they settled it. The mud dried, and people settled the area all over the place. And that was just the one they referenced as the starting point. Fascinating place. That leads us to the next adventure in finding Atlantis. Thank you.